everyone. This is Bill Maher. I am with Catholic Men for Jesus Christ, and this is our actually podcast program. Many of you have heard Brothers in Arms radio program we have for many, many years. This podcast is called Inflection Point, and I actually have a returning guest in a way because our guest actually was on the radio program, the EWTN Brothers in Arms program, and that is Joel Greene. Joel, welcome.
Hey, Bill, thank you. It's good to finally put a face to a name, and thanks for having me.
Well, it's wonderful having you, and I appreciate the inconvenience of East Coast to West Coast is not the easiest thing in the world. So thanks so much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
For everyone, I want to introduce who Joel is. Joel he's actually a very studied scholar in a lot of ways. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit on everything human body, if you will. He's published a book called The Immunity Code, which is phenomenal. You can get it easily on Amazon or his website, which is veepnutrition.com. Recently, he's publishing, I don't know if it's been published yet or it's going to be published, The Way, the Immunity Code Diet. So keep a lookout for that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. He's founder of Veep Nutrition. He has on that website, you obviously have access to his works. You have access to his nutritional programs and so forth. In some ways, I guess, Joel, you're like coaches for a lot of people as well. You've got great products on there for gut restoration, the Rebound Gut Reset, Young Body, Young Reds, Young Gut, some pretty cool products that we'll talk a little bit about. And if I were to surmise you into one sentence, it would be you have a mastery of the understanding of the human body and hacking it through diet and lifestyle. Is that fair, diet and lifestyle?
Yes. Underscore the lifestyle, I think. That's kind of been my focus.
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, people listening to this program, we've had, scripture scholars and all different kinds of people on this program, including the radio program, say, well, why is Joel Greene on this program? St. Augustine puts this best. He said, treat your soul as if you're going to die tomorrow, but treat your body as if you're going to live to 100 years. Joel is on this program because we're looking to treat our bodies as if we're going to live to 100 years, pure body, pure mind, pure soul concept. So we're going to unpack some really cool things here today. First things first, I want to ask you, what motivated you to write the new book, The Way?
Confusion, I think. That's probably the answer. Yeah. When you talk about diet or anything health related in this age, the number one thing that comes back is, well, I don't know what to believe. I mean, this guy says this and that guy says the opposite, and I don't know what to believe. And so confusion is really the enemy of clarity, and confusion is from the enemy. And so it was really the current state of diet is actually in a really sorry state. It's really very, very much behind where it could be. And the more you dive into it, what you see is that there are several important realities. Reality is something that's going to hit you in the face eventually. And there's just several important realities that are missing from diet. Realities, things that are real, that are unavoidable, and they are missing from anything related to diet today. And that was really the purpose, was to reconnect people to reality. And so I'd say that was the gist of it.
Well, actually, in your book, the first part is missing reality. So we'll ask a little bit about that, or we'll talk a little bit about that. Then there's must-have mechanisms. We could talk a little bit about that, and then diet, a better way to do it. So that's sort of how you framed your book. You mentioned confusion. I mean, everyone struggles with that. This one says go keto, all protein based. This one says, plant-based vegan. My take on it is both of them have their place as short-term solutions, perhaps, but long-term, there's major deficiencies in those types of diets. Is that your take on it?
Yes, I would probably add to that and say that when we really what we're all after is health that lasts, that's real. That's what we're all after. And the problem with a lot of short-term strategies is that if you look at a good example to connect us to what's missing is to look at psychiatric medicine. If you look at psychiatric medicine, like SSRIs, for example, what you'll see is both in the science and at the practitioner level, what you'll be advised is that, yeah, there's a short-term effect, but then there's a long-term effect. And the long-term effect, there's a lot of problems, and in fact, when you read the science literature on this stuff, what it says is that the benefits, while conspicuous, may not be worth the negatives long term. And so what that is a complete picture of the long term. That's
Mm.
missing from diet. So there's a lot of benefits to short-term diet protocols, things like keto and carnivore and, plant-based. There's a lot of benefits, but what's missing is an understanding, or a framework rather, that over the long term, doing too much of anything can actually create more problems than it's worth, can actually create negatives and issues. And I deal with a lot of people. I deal with every day people who've been doing things, and I get messages every day from people who, are 4 or 5 years into one particular way of doing something, a particular diet. And it's always the same story. It's always like, yeah, I started that diet, I did the keto thing for a few years, and then I did the fasting thing, and it was great, and everything was better. But now I've got this problem and that problem and this problem, and you hear that all the time. And so really what it gets to is that there's a missing framework, or a missing way of understanding that a lot of things that are beneficial in the short term can actually be very detrimental in the long term. And that's very important, because nobody in hindsight, you talk to people who are on psychiatric meds, and they'll tell you, oh yeah, I did Prozac in the early 90s, and at
Mhm.
first I thought it was the greatest thing ever, but now I've had all kinds of issues from it. And so that framework is critical to have.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. When I think of keto and carnivore, um, I think of deficiencies in potentially in the biome, the microbiome, something that we'll certainly talk about inevitably. When I think of plant based, you're not getting B12s. I think of sarcopenia because you're constantly catabolic. Um, so I think that's where you're going with some of these long term issues. They tend to be patterns. Am I right?
Yeah, in fact, there's a meta pattern I talk about in the new book, which is you can just graph it, and I call it just the map of how everything works. And basically, it looks like a sine wave. So it looks like in the beginning, there's an upswing, and that's all benefits, and then the mid
Mm-hmm.
tier, there's kind of everything, doesn't work bad, doesn't work great, it's just kind of neutral. But then in the long term, there's a drop, there's negatives, and that's true. That's really true of most things, because if you look at the body, there's one law that will hold out the highest truth of how the body actually works. It's a big word. It's homeostasis, and the simple translation of that word is just balance. It just means
Mm-hmm.
balance. That's all it means. And the body, God has so finely tuned this machine that we're in, that it's an intricate. It's the most complex thing we know of. The human body is the most complex collection of machinery. In fact, there's a new science called synthetic biology, or synbio. And when you talk to the guys who are, thought leaders in that space, they come right out with it. They just say, well, really, biology is nanotechnology. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
they these guys describe human biology as nanotechnology. That's what it really is to them. In other words, that's just another way of saying this thing is so advanced that it has to be in balance. Everything has to be in balance long term, and that it's very possible to take healthy things and do too much of something healthy and create an imbalance that ultimately creates a negative.
It's interesting. Are there any scenarios where environment can affect that? So, for example, my ancestors are from Ireland. I
Mm.
put one of those temporary glucose monitors on. One of my doc buddies put on me. I
Mm-hmm.
was eating potatoes. I wasn't spiking.
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be something there in the genetics, maybe for 500 years of eating potatoes, that my body processes these things different than maybe someone else. So have you noticed things like that? That there's some diversity in the genome response to foods and things like that.
Yes, there absolutely is. The tendency, though, is to think that the genome is that what you were born with dictates everything, and it doesn't. The environmental factors, example would be the microbiome, can are malleable, and they can impact the way the genome works. So, for example, you're Irish, you probably
Mm-hmm.
have a genetic, predisposition to be able to digest certain types of carbohydrates, but you could either worsen that or improve that just based on the microbiome, because the
Mm-hmm.
microbiome has more genes to power digestion than your human genome. So it's both. It's the human genome is very important, but then these other factors like the microbiome are equally important in
It's,
the equation.
it's one of the great things I got out of you completely rewired how I look at this through the immunity code. That we are a compilation of three genomes. We're not one. We have three genomes in it. Can you unpack that for everyone a little bit? I think that's
Yeah, sure.
fascinating.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, so first of all, the genome is just a fancy word for saying the library. That's what it is. The genome is a library. Think of it as a library of books, and each book tells you how to make a machine. And whenever the way the body works, which is amazing how God's done this, is that rather than making a machine and storing it, we just make the machines when we need them, and then use the spare parts when we don't need them. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So the genome is the library of books that has inside of it the programs to make the machines. These are called proteins that run the body. And so whenever the body needs a machine, it goes into the library, pulls a book off the shelf, and takes that book and builds a molecular machine, or what's called a protein, to do what it needs to do. Well, it turns out that we have three different libraries in the body, or genomes. We have the one we were born with, the human genome you got from mom and dad. But then we also have the bacterial genome, which is the genome of all the bacteria in your gut. And what's interesting is there's more books in that library than there are in the library you were born with. There's more programs, there's more books, there's more genes in that library to create, in the case of digestion, the power to digest. So that's the second genome. And then there's a third one, which is within the mitochondria, the mitochondrial genome. And that is a completely separate genome from our human genome. It's much smaller, but it's completely separate. And the really interesting thing is that all three of these libraries, they all talk to each other, and they all exchange books, so to speak. So the kind of cool takeaway is that you may not have been born with a book in your library, but you can acquire it through acquiring bacteria that have that book in the library.
Yeah, like some vitamins, folate, things like that. That's what the phytobacteria species and so forth. There's if someone's depressed, it's amazing. There's a bacterium, Mycobacterium vaccaria. It actually produces more serotonin in your gut if you have it than your brain does. L-reuteri for testosterone. Fascinating stuff, really is.
It is. I wrote an article on that actually back in 2015 in Muscle and Fitness on L-reuteri and testosterone, and that was kind of prior to the microbiome thing taking off and understanding. The basic idea is that you can acquire genes. Like you may have been born lactose intolerant, but that doesn't mean you can't handle milk. You can acquire the genes to digest milk. You may have been born gluten intolerant, but you can acquire the genes to digest glutens. And it changes the equation once you get this. Suddenly, what you were born with doesn't dictate the rest of your life in terms of like your health. You can actually shift things around quite a bit.
All right, so you set yourself up right here. Everyone who's lactose intolerant is going to email me.
Right.
What would you do if you were lactose intolerant? We'll put it that way, because this is not medical advice, anyone.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Yeah. So there's my first book, The Immunity Code. The core of that book is what's known as the gut reset, and it was a series of protocols that I actually had I had a brother who had Down syndrome, and he acquired Parkinson's and a whole bunch of issues. And we actually basically 95% ameliorated most of those issues just through resetting his gut bacteria. And it happened fast. It happened like in about 5 to 7 days, where he went from not even being able to walk 20 yards to being able to, walk a mile. And it was incredible, absolutely incredible. So basically, it's really two things. The core of the immunity code is to acquire the two bacteria that most dictate the immune system. And then in the process, those bacteria kind of downstream feed all the other ones that you need. And so those two bacteria are, number one, the family of bifidobacteria. And this is a family of bacteria. And the interesting thing about this family is they work together with the human immune system. They are partners. Their very example would be whenever you take food into the body, there's these little cells, specialized cells in the gut. They're called dendrites, and they grab little samples. We call those antigens, just to see,
Mm.
what's in here, and do we need to mount an immune defense to it. Well, the partner in doing that is bifidobacteria. So bifidobacteria actually potentiates dendritic cells and genes and all types of things to increase antigen sampling, and affects the downstream, affects T cells, affects everything. And that's just one
Mm.
example. The other bacteria is the bacteria most responsible for the gut lining, and that is called Akkermansia muciniphila. And that bacteria is very interesting. It is involved in a lot of aspects of the human immune system. It increases secretory IgA. It affects T cells. It does a number of things. But the really important thing is that it eats the gut mucin layer. It eats the gut layer a little bit, and that stimulates genes to make the gut mucus layer thicker. And so these two bacteria together form the core of a healthy gut. And so all you really need to do to gain the optimal human gut is to increase these two bacteria. And so kind of by getting these two, you get everything else. And that's the focus. And the way you do that, is the way. The way you do that's the way.
We'll certainly put links to that book actually on the site.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned bifidobacteria and Akkermansia. You're not a fan of necessarily using a lot of probiotics.
Yeah, we lost your image for a sec there, Bill.
Yeah, actually, I lost yours too. Matt will work on that.
Okay. You want me to just keep going?
Go. Yeah, let's do it.
Oh. I am mostly the approach that we've been sold, the way that we should, culture our gut is through pills. And I'm sort of in the opposite camp, which is that the best way to do it is through food, the very best way, because food has physical characteristics that pills are never going to have. For example, food has bulk and a number of other qualities that pills don't have. The other thing with pills is that we cannot 100% control where they open up in the gut. Can't really dictate that 100%. And what I have been able to see over many, many years, in fact, a lot of people don't know this, but I don't know of anybody that was the very first article that I know of published to the public at large on the microbiome and weight loss was published by me in 2007. And by 2013, I had over 16,000 outcomes targeting the gut. I don't know anybody that had any at that point. I had thousands through my nutrition software. And so through thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing these, what I was able to see is that in 99% of the cases, using food in the right way and the right timing, people were able to completely recolonize the gut, and they didn't need pills. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a place for probiotics. I do believe there's a place, and I think it is. I think it's very strategic and very short term. So an example would be you did a round of antibiotics, and after that, for a couple of weeks, maybe you want to do a few extra strains of bifidobacteria along with the gut reset. Or another case would be, you have gut dysbiosis, and there's a very particular strain that you could do for about 3 weeks to a month that could help. Those are examples of isolated sort of, and the difference, the big word would be acute versus chronic. So I believe they're best used acutely, very short term, and not in a shotgun approach, because you can run into as many problems as you solve long term with just chronic use of probiotics. And the problem now is they're in everything. Like everybody's sticking probiotics and stuff, and that's not necessarily a good thing long term. So I'm just pro food.
No, I got you. And by the way, for everyone, Joel and I can't see each other, but it is recording, so you won't have this issue when you watch this. So it'll be normal, but at least when you're watching it, not for Joel and I, we're looking at blank screens. Akkermansia mucinosa. Akkermansia is really interesting. I don't mean to spoil some of the thunder, if you will, or whatnot, but red polyphenols, fasting. These are some ways that you can actually increase Akkermansia. Am I right? Because there's a company that It's a gram-negative anaerobic bug, I believe. So it's extremely difficult to culture into probiotics. But there's one company that does make it, but I don't know if it sticks around. So ultimately, where you're going with your argument, not against probiotics, but not overusing probiotics, is your mindset is you want to feed what the bacteria that we want in our system eats. So when we talk about Akkermansia, red polyphenols, you actually have a red polyphenol powder on your website. Fasting. What else can people do to help themselves with a critical keystone species like this? Because I've heard 95% of the U.S. population doesn't even have it.
Yeah, the first thing to understand about it, and this is really important stuff, because when my first book came out in 2019, there was literally zero public awareness. And then my first book kind of put Akkermansia on the landscape. And and this is typical, next thing you know, overnight, everybody's selling supplements for Akkermansia. Okay. But typically what you find very often with supplements is that they attract people who were doing something else 2 or 3 years ago. 5 years ago, they were doing something else. And I can tell you, I've been doing this a long, long time, decades. You don't really begin to even know what you're doing until you're over 10 years at it, 15, 20 years into it. That's when you really begin to get what you're doing. So what's going on right now in the marketplace is there's this very significant push for Akkermansia. We need to have this bug. Everybody's got to have it. The thing that's missing, that 100% missing from the discussion, is this bug works synergistically and in concert with bifidobacteria. In fact, bifidobacteria is necessary because it acts as essentially a controller or a constraint on the growth of Akkermansia. So if you have too little bifidobacteria, or you don't have enough at all, then it's possible to get an overgrowth of Akkermansia, stimulating it too much. And so the right approach, is you need to have a dual approach of targeting both bifido and Akkermansia at the same time. And the really important thing to understand is no daily. Daily should not be in the discussion when it comes to either one of these things. You shouldn't be talking daily. That's the worst misconception in the marketplace, is you hear, take your daily greens, take your daily Akkermansia, that's the worst thing you can do, because Akkermansia eats down the gut lining. And what happens is, if you get too much of it, like simple example is too much fasting. We call that starvation. So in all known cases of starvation, the gut lining wears out. Why?
As does everything else.
Yes. The reason is you have too much Akkermansia. Making too much Akkermansia. Another example would be extreme diets. So, for example, long-term carnivore diets. You suppress bifidobacteria. You make Akkermansia, but you suppress bifido. And I've seen tons of people who've done long-term carnivore diets, and they come out with like, oh yeah, my gut's really messed up now. Yeah, it's because you didn't. So you need to produce both bifido and Akkermansia at the same time, and the strategies for both are slightly different, so that optimally and this is the way the immunity code and the way is set up. On different days, you're kind of emphasizing different bacteria. So one day you're emphasizing bifidobacteria a little more, and the way you do that is through polyphenols, red polyphenols, resistant starch, things like cold potatoes, things like sweet potatoes, things like that, beans, and cruciferous vegetables and inulins, so things like asparagus, broccoli, things like that. So that all targets Akkermansia, and to some degree, that targets bifidobacteria, and to some degree, it targets Akkermansia. But then you need to have, on the following day, you don't target bifido at all, and you have a short fast, and you emphasize protein a little more, where you target Akkermansia. And so by following this simple pattern, you're not getting too much of either. You're getting just enough of both, and then the bifidobacteria acts as a controller and keeps you from getting too much Akkermansia, and that's how that works.
That's pretty neat. I know you have a pretty cool gut reset in the immunity code to try to actually blow up bifidobacteria in a positive way, obviously, with the raw string beans and different strategies like that. It's pretty cool, actually. Within a couple of days, as I understand, a few days, you can completely reboot your microbiome.
Yeah, it's shockingly fast, and it kind of it makes it very interesting when you think about like microbiome testing, because you can completely recolonize the gut within a week. And then by the time you get your test back, it doesn't even, it's like you're reading yesterday's weather.
It's amazing. And again, you're turning different genes on and whatnot. And I'm going to tell you something I do, and tell me if I'm crazy or not.
Sure.
So I lift at least 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
On those days, I don't take red polyphenols because they also have antioxidant effects in the body. So I kind of want to create stress. I don't want to clean up that. That's when I'll have my protein. That's when I'll do that on days I lift. The days I don't lift, I actually try to push the other pathways, the AMP kinase pathways, and I'll eat a little bit different. Does a strategy like that make sense?
Yeah, that's basically the immunity code. The only change, so the immunity code, the core of it is you're stimulating the two bacteria that drive immunity, and then as a result, you're creating different days. And in the way I kind of clarify that into essentially, it's one day is a foraging day, the other day is a feasting day. The only thing I would offer would be that the red polyphenols, if they're designed correctly, will stimulate nitric oxide. And so you can actually do the red polyphenols on the lifting day, and then the antioxidants you kind of want to save for the recovery day.
That's interesting. So like almost like a pre-workout.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I wouldn't. And there is actually in the new book there is a pre-workout shake that is based on red polyphenols and nitric oxide and watermelon and all kinds of things to get you nice and diluted. But you're essentially 100% true. The perfect strategy is get away from this word daily. Have 3 days a week where you're stimulating free radicals. So you want to stimulate nitric oxide. The other 3 days a week, you're stimulating the antioxidants. And that's the perfect strategy. Something that's not known, generally speaking, about antioxidants is when you take them every day, you don't live as long. And the reason is you are abolishing all of that critical free radical signaling from nitric oxide. And every known disease has some issue with not making enough nitric oxide. And in fact, as we get older, the reason the cardiovascular system begins to go downhill is we're not making enough nitric oxide, and the bioavailability of the nitric oxide we do take in goes down. So that's a major problem that has to be solved. And that's why 100% of people selling supplements haven't even figured this out yet, because they're selling you, take this longevity agent, take NAD, take this. Well, that's an antioxidant, and you're taking that every day. What about the free radicals that you need? So yeah.
You speak of NAD. I was doing the NMN, the precursors, for a while, but now all of a sudden some of the data is not looking so good on at least precursors. So it's amazing how the literature does change so much, so fast, and it's tough to keep up on it, actually. That's why we have you. That's why we have the immunity code in the way. So we appreciate it.
I endeavor to do my bit.
So let's talk about a little bit, before we get into the breakdown of the book, exercise. You're an interesting guy because you were, as is the case with the microbiome, you were really ahead of the game on exercise. I just saw a talk by a surgeon who does MRIs on his patients, and he's looking at subcutaneous and visceral fat. And the only thing that seems to lower that is sprinting.
Yeah.
You're a sprinting guy, so let's go with that.
He has lifted a lot of my stuff. Yeah, but that's fine. That's the goal.
But he's measured it, which is a blessing, right? He shows before and afters.
Yeah.
Which is huge. And he points out how long distance running is actually, long run, pretty bad for you. No pun intended.
Yeah, and it's sprinting. So in my first book, I kind of threw down the gauntlet with all of this longevity stuff that, you have people going, oh, I'm aging backwards, and they look really terrible. And I just laid it down by saying, well, the real test of your age is can you go from 0 to a sprint right now without warming up? That's the real test. And if you can't do that, that's the test. And so that kind of kicked off the sprinting. Now sprinting's everywhere from that, which is good because it is the single most powerful thing you can do for the body. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's the one with the most benefits. And the reason I talked about my first book is very simple. It's the one exercise in all the exercises that are out there that is tied to survival. it's the one that if you did that one really good, there's chances are you're going to live, and if you weren't very good at it, you're probably going to get eaten. So, yeah, sprinting gives a lot of bang for the buck in terms of return.
How would you recommend someone who's obviously hasn't been sprinting, hasn't even,
Hmm.
probably even been running?
Hmm.
How do they work up to something like that? Because the benefits are off the charts.
Yeah, so I have a free 90-day course in it. Free. And just go to my Instagram and click in my link in the bio, and you'll see my free content and click in there. And then it's a free 90-day course. And if you're interested in sprinting, I would highly suggest taking that because you're going to get hurt unless you do it the right way. You're going to get hurt. And the way I do it in this course is you spend the first you spend the first 5-6 weeks indoors just breaking the mechanics down, and 1 week after the next just slowly introducing um, pounding in back into the Achilles and the feet and strengthening the feet and getting the body ready, and you just baby step your way over 90 days back to sprinting, and that's the right way to do it. I've seen a lot since my book came out. Suddenly everybody's a sprinter, and I've seen a lot of like suggestions on sprinting and how to get into it. And you just, if you haven't been doing it like a really long time, most people are probably going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. So it takes a while to build back strength into the feet and into the Achilles and into all these different parts. And so the big takeaway would be baby steps. And if it takes you 6 months, that's okay. Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. And what a lot of people do who want to get back into sprinting is they're so eager to get back into it that they kind of go too fast, and then you're going to get hurt. So, but if you will just baby step your way into it, and I just have people start just with arm movements, just
Mm.
wiring in those mechanics, and then your feet are flat on the ground. And then the next week, you're lifting the feet off the ground. And then the next week, but it's just so gradual and so slow. And that's the key, is the baby steps, because you don't want to get hurt.
Yeah, injuries. I mean, as you get older, I remember in my late 30s, that's when it started happening. I started popping hammies, trying to run for a fly ball or playing in the soccer. It's my hammies every time.
Yep.
Of course, I wouldn't warm up. That didn't help either. But no, injuries is a major thing as we get a little bit older. And do you see an elasticity? Do you see muscle improvement? So if a guy is 55 years of age and he starts going through your 90-day protocol, do you see this person being able to pick up and improve their speed and whatnot? Because first thing in the world is they're gonna be disappointed they're not as fast as they were when they were 20, because they probably haven't run since they're 20, and then they have these memories and they're not going to. Do you see measured improvement? Obviously, it wouldn't go all the way back to when they were younger, but do you see measured improvement?
Yeah, you can absolutely, over a year, you can absolutely improve. You have to keep in mind that as we age, it is the fast twitch muscle that you're losing. It's not the slow twitch.
Mm,
You can take a guy in his 60s and put him on TRT and who's never been on stuff, and he'll look amazing. He'll look like he's 20, but that's all slow twitch muscle.
yeah.
It's the fast twitch muscle we're losing, and it's the fast twitch muscle that have the mitochondria. So the mitochondria is what keeps us young, and so the density of mitochondria is in the fast twitch. And if you start training that, you can actually recover to some degree. And in fact, with modern training methods now and new tools like peptides and all this stuff, in fact, I'm going to be 60 this year, and there's a goal I have. I don't even want to say it, but I have a rather lofty goal involving sprinting, and it just, I'm going to throw everything I know at it. I'm going to throw all these modern training techniques and peptides and everything to be able to achieve this goal. And I don't know if I can accomplish it. It's in the 200 meters, but I think I can probably get pretty close. And we'll see. But I'm just anxious to apply all of the modern training techniques for improving fast twitch muscle and just seeing what I can do at this age. So.
Well, that's awesome. You plugged me. You got my interest. Peptides. Um, I've gone the whole BPC 157, CJ Samper route.
Mm, yep.
Great. It's a nice overlap because BPC heals the gut like nothing else. It's made in the gut, right? Um, are these some of the peptides you're using?
Well, I'm not using anything right now, but and what I'll add to that is something with peptides no one's talking about is that there is you have so many trips to the well with peptides
Yeah.
over time. Like I first used BPC 157 in 2017, and I had a shoulder injury that I'd had for 10 years, and it was miraculous. And I was ready to get surgery, and the BPC 157 completely healed. I got back. I could bench press again. It was great. And then subsequently to that, I kind of re-injured it again. And anyways, suffice to say that was 2017, so that was like 7-8 years ago. And now BPC doesn't work on me at all, barely. Like I don't notice anything with it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's true of everything though. You'll find that's true of absolutely everything. Like my daisy cutter diet that's in the first book. I think I've run through 20 iterations of that over the last since 2006, and it doesn't work on me now like the way that it used to. But when I first did it, it was shocking, and that's true of
Interesting.
everything. Well, but that's true. See, this is what's missing. This is
Yeah.
what's missing from health and diet is the understanding of the framework of time that everything attenuates over time, everything. And so with BPC, I don't really feel too much anymore on it, but what I'm going to do for this sprinting challenge I'm doing is I'm definitely going to incorporate it anyway, along with probably the thymosin beta 4 and GHK. GHK is the one peptide I do every day. I do that every day. And then probably the CJCs, probably CJC with ipamorelin. I'll do that. And I've only been on that one once, and that was shocking, like
Mm.
shocking, ridiculous. Like I looked 20 pounds bigger on that stuff. And I remember walking into like a bar on a Sunday just to watch a football game, and this kid going like, "Oh my gosh, I want to look like you when I'm your age," But I mean, I kind of understood what bodybuilders who take steroids, what it's like. It's like as long as you're taking that, you look just ridiculous, And as soon as you go off it, it goes away. So,
Oh, is that
but
what you noticed? Like, 'cause there's a growth hormone secretagogues, right?
oh, instantly, you
It's
lose it instantly. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's interesting too.
Oh
Wow,
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
lean guy, so I there's
yeah. That's why I
I have
don't,
nowhere to go.
stuff like that. It works as long as you take it, and that's part of the issue I've had with so much stuff in this thing I'm in this field, because there's so much fakery, so much fakery. You have people just completely on all kinds of stuff. They lie about it. They don't tell you the truth and giving advice, but they don't actually understand if their advice would work if they weren't on all the stuff they were on.
Mm.
And it's just, that's why I'm not on anything. I'm on, I take a couple peptides like CJC. I'll take that, and I'll take like a testosterone boosting pill. But I'm not on TRT. I'm not on steroids. I'm not on any that stuff, because you don't actually know what works when you're on that
Yep.
stuff, because that some of that stuff like the CJC,
Hmm.
that stuff works so ridiculously with the ipamorelin. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned testosterone as guys listening to this. I don't want to go on testosterone therapy. My testosterone was actually very high for my
Hmm.
age.
Huh.
And then within the last 2 years, it dipped down a bit. And I was like, well, doc's like age. And this is a longevity doc, actually, MD. So his big push was testosterone replacement therapy. But I was like, I don't want to be on something forever.
Hmm.
So, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm looking into clomiphene.
Yeah.
Because at least it won't shut my system down. Like, so, I get a boost, and if I go off it, I go back to baseline, as I have read, at least. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no. I think. Well, like, so I tried that stuff once for I don't know about a month. Didn't feel anything.
Mm.
Didn't feel anything. So I'll take that for what it is. But I think it's good to have a bottle of that around for other reasons. So that's what I would say about that.
Do you want to share that other?
Maybe privately I would share, but yeah, no, and it's not what you're thinking. It's
No, no,
definitely
no. I didn't know. That's that.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
curious. I'm just curious because
Oh, yeah.
you maybe the biggest part of this whole entire podcast at this point is dismantling the idea of over supplementing. Because I was going to ask you about supplements.
Hmm.
Everyone's taking a lot of stuff now.
Yeah.
And I kind of look at it in my mind as, if you're going to supplement, the first thing you should consider doing is supplement where you have deficiencies. Like, we typically tend to be D3 deficient. There's not a lot of magnesium in food, as I understand it. Things like that. What are your thoughts there on supplementing and supplementing to deficiency?
The number one thing is to eliminate the word daily. That is the number one thing. And that I know of, I am the only person that sells supplements that's telling you don't take my stuff daily. I don't know of
Mm.
anybody else saying that right now. I don't know, but that's the number one thing is there's very few things you should be taking daily. I think the things that make a good case for daily would be if you're over 50, CoQ10 probably makes a really good case for that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, GHK makes a good case for daily, and it's a short list of things that you probably want to be on daily for a number of reasons. But
Is there anything every other, every third, or once a week that
oh yeah,
you
for
think
sure. Oh
makes
yeah,
sense?
yeah. Niacin is at the top of the list. So niacin, I think, makes a huge case for itself once to twice a week, and that's part of the immunity code is taking niacin at the end of a fast and then doing what's called a 4-axis rotation, where you lay flat on your belly and then you breathe deeply. You take niacin, you wait for the peak of the niacin flush, wait for it to hit you. You're all red
Mm-hmm.
faced. You lay flat on your belly, flat on your face. You breathe deeply for a minute, and then you roll on your side, repeat, roll on your back, and then roll on the other side. And then you sit up and you finish with deep breaths. And that is incredibly energizing. Like if you haven't done that, I would try that today. That's
Really? So
really,
when
oh
we're
yeah.
talking immediate release niacin, because
Mm.
anyone who gets niacin, they're probably going to see slow release.
Yeah, you
It
want the real slow.
metabolizes nicotinamide, whereas immediate release is nicotinic acid. It's a different pathway,
Yeah.
and that's you get that vasodilation. So that flush is not bad for you people. It actually just everything's dilating. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's one of the best, clears lipids. I mean, it's one of the best things for you, but you don't want to do it all the time, and you don't want to, niacin there's a few supplements that are wonder supplements, and oddly, they're the cheapest things out there, which is vitamin D and niacin.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't want to do them all the time. Like
Gotcha.
vitamin D, there's now this thing bubbling up on vitamin D, which is the stupidest thing imaginable. I mean, it's an example of why people are confused, and it's going around. What you have is you get people who were doing something 5 years ago, and then they get into this, they read a little bit, and they think they've mastered something, and then they go out and so the newest thing is don't supplement with vitamin D. It's rat poison and blah blah. I actually, I actually have wound up debating this guy who's one of the guys leading this thing, just in a text, not a text stream, but a social media post, and he just had nothing to say. He just
Mm.
got blown out of the water because he didn't know what he was talking about. And the reason is I just hasn't looked at it long enough. But so vitamin D is one of the most powerful supplements that you can use, and it's dirt cheap. And I mean, I've used it for guys in their 60s for erectile dysfunction. I've used it for my brother. Um, it, that with the gut reset was shocking. I mean, it was just amazing how it worked. You can use it any number of ways. I use it sometimes after cold plunging to increase testosterone,
Mm.
and it's extremely useful. You just don't want to use it all the time, and you want to take it with K, and you want to be kind of purposeful when you're using it. So, if you're there's the another sort of distortion now is just get your vitamin D from the sun. There's really good reasons to not go in the sun all the time. I hate to break it to you. In fact, a couple years ago, about 5 years ago, a guy designing a antioxidant sunscreen wanted to hire me to help him design the thing. And we wound up not engaging because he didn't get his funds and all that. But long story short, I had to do all the research anyway. I spent quite a bit of time looking at the effects of the sun on the skin and all that. And you know, I hate to break it to you, but the sun does age you. Okay, yes, we need sun. You need some sun, but getting your vitamin D from the sun all the time, particularly depending on where you live, it it, it does make a good case to supplement here and there with it. And so vitamin D is very, very effective. With my own supplements, which is I have three, and the goal of those three was to impact the body globally in the most powerful way and take 50 things and boil them down to 3 lids.
Mm.
And you take 2 of those on opposing days, 3 times a week. And then one of them, once you've done the gut reset, you take once a week and you just add it to the reds. And that covers a ton of ground. I mean, that
Can we talk
covers.
about them?
Mhm,
Can we talk
yeah.
about those
Mhm,
three supplements?
yeah. So top of the list would be Young Body, which
Mhm.
it is, of course, I'm biased, but it is the most effective longevity supplement on the market ever made by far, because when you look at like what's in it, first of all, it's the dosing. So, and I talk about this in the new book, the idea is that, you know, it's not just the food, it's the dose and the duration of the food that, in other words, the health properties of a thing are not dependent solely on the thing. They're equally dependent on how much you take and for how long. Equally, 50%. And so with Young Body, the dosing is gigantic. Like the doses in there are huge. They're gram doses, like 2 grams of NAC in there. The next thing is the way those things work together synergistically. So the first combo in there is NAC and glycine together. And NAC and glycine has been shown in human studies to reverse several markers of aging. It's very, very potent. Like everybody should be taking NAC glycine. The way I've done it is daily. You don't do it daily. That's the thing. So it's done correctly. So you're taking the appropriate dose. Like you can have the right ingredients, but if the dosing is too small, it's wasted. You're just paying for a label.
Yeah.
So, and it's much more expensive to produce products with efficacious doses than it is to, like, I could have the same product with the same ingredients on there and use pixie dust doses, and it wouldn't even work. So the
Yeah.
dosing is huge. But another thing also is alpha ketoglutarate is in this. So alpha ketoglutarate, it's it's a it's a metabolite. Metabolites are products of metabolism, and in the mitochondria, this metabolite is produced, and it reverses several very important aspects of the aging process. One of the most important things that it does is it goes right at your fat cells, and it helps to reverse senescent cells, or cells that have basically just switched off inside your body fat. And the reason that's important is that body fat acts as a sort of grand central station for the whole body for aging. And because body fat, it tends to get inflamed as we get old. And when it gets inflamed, you have all sorts of issues that spread out everywhere to the rest of the body, spread to the muscles, spread to everything. And it acts like kind of a vector. It's like changing the tracks. So keeping body fat healthy is hugely important. And it's got a massive dose. It's got 2 grams of alpha ketoglutarate. Alpha ketoglutarate does so many other things. And then it's got white willow bark, which is what aspirin's made from.
Aspirin. Yeah.
And the really interesting thing there is that there was a longevity study done on worms a couple years ago. And what they discovered was that they took every longevity agent known. So they took rapamycin, they took metformin, they took doxycycline, they took resveratrol, they took them all. And in terms of extending lifespan, aspirin smoked every one of them by a large margin. I mean, it wasn't even close. Aspirin smoked all of them. The reason seems to be there is a compound in white willow bark called plant extract 21, PE21. Plant extract 21 addresses an area of longevity that has really been neglected, and that has to do with what's called, there's a big word for it, it's called proteostasis, or rather the homeostasis of proteins within the cell. And so one of the reasons we get old is that cells need to make these molecular machines in order to maintain themselves. Think of a Tesla factory and think it's automated. And you have all these robots running around, and the robots maintain the other robots, right? Well, if the maintenance robots go down, then the whole factory eventually shuts down. And that's what happens inside the cell. So plant extract 21 seems to reverse a lot of the issues related to the loss of protein homeostasis in the cell. And so when you look at everything that's in Young Body, it is kind of covering it's covering acres and acres of ground in terms of helping to slow the aging process. You could just take NAC alone and list a lot of things, but there's a cherry on top, which is there really is no real and lasting health and no extension of life without the gut immune axis. There isn't, because that's where the immune system begins. And so Young Body complements the gut reset, which is Young Reds, my red phenol, and Young Gut, those two products, because those products address the gut bacteria directly. They grow the right bacteria. They do all these great things. But there's other issues like the thickness of the biofilm and all kinds of things. And Young Body directly addresses that. So when you look at like longevity products, they're all focused on like the telomeres and AMP-K and all this stuff, but
Yeah.
they're leaving out like, you can't. There's no real deal here unless you're addressing the gut in a comprehensive way. And so that gets into Young Gut, which is like an amazing product. It's only got 2 ingredients. In my first book, I introduced what are called human milk oligosaccharides. These are
Phenomenal.
carbohydrates. You get these
Phenomenal.
they're amazing. Yeah, you get these in mother's milk, and they set the human immune system. And that's why it was called the immunity code. Was we set the human immune system, we reset it with the same food we got when we were kids, and they do all kinds of things. They act as immune decoys. They prevent adhesion of pathogens to the gut lining. They do all kinds of things. Most importantly, they act as food for bifidobacteria and Akkermansia. And then along with that, what's in there is a very specialized form of resistant starch. It's called Solnol. And this is the only product in the world that has this form of resistant starch with HMOs. And Solnol is the world's only resistant starch that has data on it. Like they've actually spent the money to do the human studies on this stuff. And they've shown that this stuff can increase Akkermansia 300% by itself. By itself, this stuff increases Akkermansia. And so when you look at a food matrix to feed the optimal bacteria, Young Gut is amazing. I mean, like you put people on that stuff and like overnight their bowel movements change. Like they just smoothen out and just boom, they get regular. It's amazing. And then the final cherry on top is Young Reds, which is a red phenol blend. And what's interesting about this is I designed it specifically to complement the immune system. So there's a lot of red phenols on the market, but the formulas are really old, and they copy each other. They're just taking formulas and reusing them. What's really interesting about Young Reds is I really focused on a key phenol called cyanidin 3 glucoside, and this is it's a color pigment, and the things this stuff does is just remarkable. I mean, it's remarkable, its impact on metabolism and all kinds of fat oxidation and all kinds of things. It's found in blackberries, it's found in raspberries, and then combine that with a lot of other phenols, the most important of which is purple corn extract. And by itself, like I first tried this stuff back in 2018. The research on this stuff's incredible. Purple corn extract, it's made from a non-GMO corn out of Peru. That's where you get it. And this stuff has shown to completely flip the profile of immune cells in the body by itself. So it takes you from the inflammatory macrophage to the anti-inflammatory. And so when you take all 3 of these products under 3 lids, it's the foundation. I mean, that for me, that's my foundation. That's like I do those 3 things. That's my foundation. I'm doing those 3 things 6 days a week, just different ones on different days. And then when I need to, I'll take some niacin, or I'll supplement with some NMN or other things. But my foundation is those 3 things, and it saves a lot of time. And it's hitting longevity, it's hitting the gut, it's hitting immunity, it's hitting all that all at once.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I never heard of the corn extract data. That's pretty neat stuff. So with other supplements, maybe a little bit of D, but again, the key takeaway here is not every day. Not every day.
Yeah, creatine probably is, it's particularly as a longevity thing.
Yeah.
Creatine is good. I
What
mean,
about creatine? You hear about the new molecule of creatine?
Yeah.
Creatine?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to affect every user is what, let's say that's what they're marketing, as opposed to where creatine, some people don't feel anything or notice anything. Whereas with this creatine, they do.
Well, you got to keep in mind everything attenuates. So when you say, you don't feel it over time, you're probably not going to feel the new one either. You might feel it more up front, but you're not going to feel it downstream. So creatine, I first started using in 1990 when Bill Phillips started marketing it as phosphagen. And it was incredible back then because it was the one supplement that, oh, I feel that. Like you got 2 or 3 extra reps with creatine. But I don't feel that anymore. I don't get the extra reps with it anymore. So attenuation, everything attenuates over time.
What do you do to avoid? Is there anything you could do to improve attenuation? Rotating things.
Yep.
Do you get it back a little bit? I mean, it sounds
Yep.
like in some cases it's diminishing return until nothing works.
Well, but that's the thing, like so for example, like for testosterone, I have 4 or 5 different stacks of things I just rotate in across the year.
You know what I wanted to shift gears to? What are your thoughts on spermidine or autophagy?
Yeah, very important. So, okay, how deep do you want to go here?
Well, it's a polyamine, right? I listen. I say go deep. Let's
Okay.
go for it.
Okay, so spermidine, yes. So spermidine is what's called a polyamine. These are proteins that are really important to longevity. There's 3 major ones. Interestingly, there's a protein called P10 that we make as we get older, and it sort of inhibits the polyamines. It sort of inhibits them, particularly in body fat. And it's one reason people can't lose body fat.
Sort of like CD38 inhibiting NAD.
Yes, think of it that way. Yeah. As one reason people can't lose body fat as they get older is you begin to make P10, and it sort of inhibits the polyamines like spermidine. But the really important thing to understand about spermidine is that 2 things. Number one, it absolutely does help with longevity and help with autophagy, and it makes a good case to be in the mix if you can afford it. The thing to understand about it, though, is that it increases a key bacteria in the gut, which is Fecal bacteria prosnitzi. And Fecal bacteria prosnitzi is a cancer promoter. So
interesting.
It is the cancer promoter. Like if you do a microbiome test and it comes back with Fecal bacteria prosnitzi, you're getting cancer, guaranteed. So the thing to understand about spermidine is if you're going to do it, there's a way to do it, which is, like me personally, I would not do spermidine unless I did my own gut protocol with it, because the way to prevent Fecal bacteria prosnitzi is to crowd it out with the other bacteria. And that's how you do that. So I would, if I'm going to do spermidine, I would make sure that I do my gut reset, and then I would stay on it, like in terms of the diet and those other things, because, and then if you do that, if you cover those bases, I think you're in good shape to use it.
That's fascinating, because there's some people pushing that pretty hard right now in this literature.
Well, a good friend of mine, Leslie, is a good friend of mine over at the Oxford thing, and I've talked with her about this, about the issue with that bacteria. So that's just my opinion. That's how I would do it.
Well, all the more reason to get your books, because it's overwhelming. Everyone's got a spin on something, and if you listen to everything, you'll be taking 50 supplements really quick. This is not uncommon. I mean, I was going to even ask about some other things and whatnot, but before we want to move towards closure at some point where you can talk a little bit about the way. I'm curious about what you do for testosterone. We have a lot of men listen to this program, and it goes down. I mentioned niclomiphene. It's something that toying around with a little bit. I don't want to get TRT. What is some of the literature? We'll put it that way. What is some of the literature showing, if you will, on ways that we can address this?
Well, so I have my own little system I've developed over the years, and I'm not on anything right now. Like I'm not on TRT, or clomiphene or anything like that. It's not to say that I'm trying to make it till 60, and because I want to do a get in shape thing, my best shape by 60, and I want to do it without any of that stuff. And I'm probably going to give it a try after 60. But what I've done that's worked really well over time is I laid out in the immunity code And it's basically this. The first thing is it's a 48-hour cycle, a 48-hour pattern, and you just keep repeating this 48-hour pattern. That's the first thing. And I'll start kind of midway into that pattern. So the important part of it is that you wake up and you're doing a fast, and you're going to get cold, and you're going to take all kinds of goodies around getting cold. Example would be vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to sprint. So after, and the cool thing about sprinting is that, the cool thing about getting cold is that you don't have to warm up. It's so cool. Like if I try to sprint, there's some days where, I'm not feeling it, and I try and sprint without getting cold, and it takes me 3 or 4, 50, 60 meters just to even get where I can sprint, because I'm just, boy, I don't have it today. If I get cold, right out the get-go, I can run.
What's going on there? Because I would think that everything would tighten up and you'd potentially pull a muscle easier.
You would think that, but what I've found happens is that you basically you basically turn the mitochondria on, you open up oxphos, you begin producing adrenaline, you get that adrenaline dump. And, historically, when you needed to sprint, adrenaline went with it. It was because something, a lion jumped out of a bush, and, you get this big adrenaline pop and you need to run. So I think there's something to that. But I've just noticed that what I'll do is I'll get cold, and then post-cold, I'll take some things to accentuate testosterone. I'll take the usual suspects. I'll take long jack, but a lot of it. I'll take a gram of it. And and the most important in there though is vitamin D. And then I'll go through and just activate all the muscles by slapping them, so that just activates the muscles, and then I can go sprint. I can just go and do it right then and there. And that is the most important thing, is the sprinting post cold. It's that right there. That's kind of the foundation of it. And then on that, you stack diet as a layer, supplements as a layer, and sleep as a layer. Okay. And so all 4 of those things, this is called the amplified fast. And it's a core aspect of the immunity code. So you're taking fasting and you're kicking it to the next level by the sequence and the way that you do things and what you're introducing when you fast. So sprinting in a fasted state, post-cold, with a little help like vitamin D, you're kicking your testosterone through the roof doing that. And so then the next phase after that is diet and how you eat. And diet can help things quite a bit. So that's the way, and we'll break that down here in a minute. Then the next phase is sleep, and timing what you take around sleep, and making sure you get great sleep. So in my free content, I have a whole thing called Super Sleep, and it's free to go in there and take that. And that's all these steps to take around sleep.
Don't interrupt you, because with that, last time we spoke, you brought up an amazing concept that I have embraced, obviously, because everyone's tried melatonin. Maybe it's worked once, maybe it never works. Everyone's tried this one thing. What you emphasize is that these different things sort of stack onto each other, and you get a much greater effect. So you can't look at it like you're going to take one thing to sleep well, and all of a sudden you're going to be out for 8 hours. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a stacking, cumulative effect. Is that fair?
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a lot. So one of the problems we're running into as we get older is the pineal's calcifying. Okay, and the more this calcifies, the more trouble you're going to have sleeping. So that's a meta consideration you have to factor into the mix long term to keep that from happening, which means you're going to need leafy greens in the diets, things with phytate. Phytates are bad. No, that prevents the pineal from calcifying. Okay, so that's a big picture thing. But specifically around sleep, it's not just the melatonin. Sometimes, and if you get into the free content section on Super Sleep, you'll see, oh my gosh, it's a huge list. Sometimes it's I needed a small carbohydrate meal like a grilled cheese sandwich, and then I needed these breathing techniques, and then it's the supplement stack I'm going to do. So it's not the same supplement stack every night. You have 3, 4 different, 5 different stacks you can rotate in depending. So I will example. One stack I might use that I'll rotate in and out would be a stack of creatine, glycine, ornithine, GABA, and CBN, which is not CBD, it's the cousin, CBN. And that's a fantastic stack. That's one. Another one I could rotate in would be melatonin, CBD, GABA, and just, we can just keep adding stuff into that. And
Sure.
So I just have different stacks that I rotate in so the body doesn't get used to them. And I'm always taking something to help with sleep. It just depends on what it is. But and it's just adding different stacks in.
Yeah, some people are blessed; they can sleep, but a lot of people, especially as we get older, it gets a little bit more difficult.
And it's a growing problem too. I mean, it's really like poor sleep has become an epidemic. I mean, it's really interesting.
What do you think about light and all that stuff? Blue light, red light, and whatnot with regards to sleep.
It's important, but it's overplayed. So the first thing with that is stop wearing blue blockers during the day. That is the dumbest thing imaginable. Like, did you ever actually read the research on this? Okay, so blue light is daylight. It's the light of day. When you put on blue blockers, you block the blue light. You block the light of day. When you block the light of day during the day, you reset the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, the sleep clocks in the brain. You push them forward. So the blue light in the day is important to advance the sleep clocks to get you to bed. So when you're wearing blue blockers during the day, you're actually disrupting sleep at night.
No, it's insane. No, it is. You mentioned I can go on forever, and this is terrible. But you mentioned the pineal gland. Have you ever tried Epitalin as a peptide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I found that to be there's you don't even have to go sub-Q with it. There's a company in England that makes a dropper, and my gosh, it resets your circadian rhythms. It's temporary, but I noticed you do this for a few weeks and you're sleeping great for a couple of months at least. Pretty amazing.
We'll have to try the dropper. I've done the Kavinson oral peptides and didn't feel anything for that. But
yeah, no, I definitely felt it with this because it's sublingual in a sense. You're letting it sort of get into your system. It's profound health. Profound health.
Send me the link for that. Yeah, I'd love to try that one.
I will.
I'm a
but
supplement
that I felt because I'm one of those people that I don't feel supplements often. Very few things I've noticed. Like I felt that. That was one. So that definitely is high in my book. All right, so let's get into the way. Okay. Yeah. So sort of 3 parts: missing realities, must-have mechanisms, and then diet, a better way to eat. So missing realities. What do you mean by that?
So reality means something that you're going to run into. It's just a question of when, right? Time is the most egregious, significant example of a reality that is missing from diet today. Is time. When you inventory, bring any expert on you want and ask them questions. You go, hey, keto diet's good. You're going to get these yes or no answers. Okay. Is carnivore good? You're going to get a yes or no answer. Is milk thistle good? What is completely missing from the assessment of anything is time. In other words, so if you ask me, is Prozac good? My answer would have time in it. My answer would say, well, up front, it'll do this, and you're going to feel this. You may even lose some weight. Long term, you may gain some weight, and you may see this happen. Okay, that's the correct answer, but that's completely missing from fitness in anything to do with anything in biohacking, health, fitness, diet. It's all missing. It's like you're in a bubble reality where time doesn't exist.
Yeah, take this forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A huge example is fat loss. Fat loss is the most, I just use the word embarrassing. Like I'm literally embarrassed for my industry. Like when you look at fat loss and you look at like any diet, there is absolutely zero according for time. You know who Gary Brecka is, right?
I do. Yeah, he's all over the internet.
Right. So, and his transformation with Dana White. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Okay. So let's take that as an example. We look at that and we think, wow, oh my gosh, I got to do that. That's it. Whatever he did, that's it. And I got to do that. Right. Well, what's missing from that is a framework similar to SSRIs or similar to Prozac, where you understand, well, up front, you're going to get this, but then you're going to get that, and then you're going to get that. That's completely missing. That's not even there. In fact, in this convo here, we'll introduce it. And just this will change everything here for these listeners forever. So what you need to understand about fat loss is the framework of time looks like this. Number one, if you've never really dieted before, never really done a weight loss program, and you decide you're going to get a handle on this, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. Anything can work, and it can work incredibly well. And the reason is not the diet. The reason has nothing or very little to do with the specifics of the diet. It has to do with the fact your body's fresh. What do I mean with that? I mean that your body does not have repeated stressing of dropping body fat. Dropping body fat is incredibly stressful. In fact, for cancer patients, they caution against it because it's very stressful on the body. Okay. So it's the fact your body's fresh. It's the fact it's your first time doing it. If you haven't had a major weight reduction before, what's very typical is you'll see someone come into the picture who has never really done anything before, and they find a diet and they get a major weight reduction. Carnivore example has lots of examples of this. Okay. And they think it's carnivore. Oh, it's carnivore. That's what did it. No, that's not what did it. What did it is the fact you've never done it before. That's what did it. Okay. And then what you see with all protocols, doesn't matter what it is, 95% of people over 5 years, statistically proven, will regain everything and more that they lost over 5 years. Okay. Now this is where stupidity comes in, because what you hear typically as a response to that is, well, they didn't maintain the habits. Okay. No, that's not what happened. What happened is the body, God has designed our bodies to keep us alive. Okay. And the body has a response to what it perceives as starvation. And how does the body know when it's starving? When it loses a bunch of body fat. That's the signal to the body. Okay. If we lose our body fat stores, oh, there must be a famine. Oh, we must be starving. Oh, we've got so all of these genes, all this machinery, all these mechanisms kick in to efficiently regain the weight. And that is a protective mechanism God put in place to keep us from starving out as a race. Okay. You can prove this. Well, first of all, you don't need to prove it because you just have to talk to anybody who's 50, who's been dieting for a number of years. And it's always the same story. It's, yeah, I did Atkins first and it worked great that first time. And then I gained the weight back. So I did Atkins again and it was a little hard, but I still lost the weight. But then I gained it back and then it didn't work. So then I tried keto and gosh, it worked. But then I gained it back and then it didn't work. And now I can't lose weight. And now I can't lose weight at all. I don't know what's going on. What's going on? What's going on is there's a missing framework to understand what goes on. And that missing framework looks like this. Imagine a spin cycle that goes up. Okay. So every time you do a fat loss protocol, the signal to the body losing our fat stores is, oh no, another famine. So what's the body do? It gets better and better and better with every trip to the well at hanging on to the weight. And it makes sense. That's survival, right? Now, let's prove it. In my new book, I talk about a mechanism, just came out, brand new study, 2023. And what these scientists were able to show is that in the area of the brain that is dictating food intake, there's some key neurons. There's one called the agouti, AGRP, the agouti-related proteins. These drive sort of eating. There's another one called the POMC neurons, propaniomelanocortin cortex. And these neurons, they stuff food intake down. In other words, you don't eat as much. These are exactly what GLP-1 drugs work on. So GLP-1 drugs work on the POMC neurons, so you don't eat as much. What they were able to show was that post-fat loss, the neurons that are responsible for signals that make us eat more to the agouti-related cortex tripled.
Wow.
A physical increase, measurable, that you could see. So in other words, think of it this way. Think of a one-lane highway. You can only fit so many cars down it, okay? And now we had a little construction project and boom, now it's a 3-lane highway. So now the signals going down that highway are triple. triple the strength. It's proven.
Yeah,
So
I've doc friends that even mentioned that they'll put them on semaglutide or tirzepatide or something like that, and then they lose the weight, and then all of a sudden, as soon as they go off it, it gets even worse.
So now we need to put this into a framework that encompasses 40, 50 years, okay? Because this is the real story. This is the story nobody gets. When you take one cycle of that, oh yeah, I did this and it worked great, but then I regained the weight. Oh no. Well, the equation you're coming back to is no longer the same. Okay, just think of those neurons in the brain. You started with one lane highway, and now you got three. Okay, so now your physiology is different. Your body's different now. And so you keep coming at this problem with these diets to drop the weight, and they work so you're getting this effect. You're getting, boom, oh, they work. Oh, but then, oh, now they didn't work. You're getting that effect every time. A cumulative effect of that over time is that it gets harder and harder and harder to lose the weight. The slope of difficulty goes from here to here. So by the time you're in your 50s, very difficult to drop body fat if you've been doing lots of fat loss programs. That is a reality that's missing that involves the framework of time. And so that's one aspect of reality that I talk about in the way.
It's fascinating because I think everyone's gone through something like that. See, listen, I recommend your stuff. Anyone listening to this would do well by getting the way and the immunity code. I mean, it's funny, you triggered me on a few things because I read the immunity code a few years ago. I've already forgotten stuff. Like that whole testosterone protocol, I forgot it. But I wasn't doing cold therapy at the time, too. That's not the easiest thing for anyone. You got to get one of those. But they make these little blow-up little pools you can do now, which are a little bit easier to do. So must-have mechanisms. What are we talking there?
Well, there are a few mechanisms that are non-negotiable. So let's say the goal, everybody's got the same goal. The goal is health that lasts, real health, real and lasting health. And by saying that, it implies a truth that's missing, which is that you can have fake health. You can have health that looks very good, looks very impressive. Like, oh, wow, yeah, wow, look what he did. I want to do what you did, right? But it doesn't last. It doesn't last. I know a lot of those. I know a lot of people like that have, taken steroids or, had a season where they could work out all the time and they achieved what looks like health, but it didn't last. Or I've seen people that look really healthy that got cancer or had heart attacks and died. That's not real health, right? So if you want real health, which we all do, then there's 3-4 basic things that must be in place. The first of these is insulin. Insulin function must work at an optimal level for you to have real health. That's not negotiable. There's no one can debate that. There's not a PhD, MD expert in the world that would come on and go, insulin's not important. You don't need that. Not one. Everybody would have to agree on that. So insulin must work at a very efficient level to be really healthy. In fact, why do these new drugs work so good? Because they make insulin work better. That's why. And once you get that, once you understand insulin's not negotiable, it brings up another question, which is, well, how do you get there? How do you get that? And that takes us into something that changes the equation entirely of diet, because what I present in the new book is something that's missing, which is there's a family of hormones surrounding insulin. Not just one. It's not just insulin. It's a family. It's insulin. It's GIP, glucose insulinotropic polypeptide. It's GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1. It's adiponectin, which is a hormone secreted by our fat. And then it is the opposite hormone of insulin, which is glucagon. So, and then all of those hormones rest on a foundation of the microbiome. So think of them as standing. This is the microbiome. Think of them as standing on the microbiome. That's the foundation. If you take this out, it doesn't work the same. So that's the proper picture for insulin. Another reason that some of these supplements out now, like Akkermansia, you can buy an Akkermansia supplement and it helps people get lean. Why? Because the microbiome directly affects insulin function through a number of mechanisms like bile acids, for example. So the microbiome is essential in the picture of proper insulin. And once you get this, it completely changes. In fact, it destroys every diet of this age, destroys it. Because if you just made that one thing a priority, one thing, which is, okay, how do we reverse engineer eating to hit all those hormones and everything? A carnivore diet's no longer a carnivore diet. A keto diet's no longer a keto diet. And you just keep going down the list. It changes every known diet just to make insulin work well over time. Because then what that means is that, let's take the example of insulin and glucagon. Insulin lowers blood sugar. Glucagon raises blood sugar. Okay? They're opposites. They're yin and yang. They don't work at the same time, so to speak. Like if you're going to stimulate insulin, okay, you're going to suppress glucagon. Okay? So really, you need to stimulate both. They both need, think of the pedals of a bike. They both need stimulation, right? But they don't need it at the same time. In other words, different days require different turning of the pedal, so to speak. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Think of it that way. Which, if you think about it, makes sense in a foraging environment. In a foraging hunting environment, you're not eating the same things every day. You're actually stimulating different aspects of insulin depending on the day. Maybe you had a feasting day, you eat a ton of meat. Maybe you had a foraging day, you found a ton of berries. Well, on the berry day, you're hitting insulin more. On the feasting day, you're hitting glucagon more, right? So just these two hormones, understanding these, changes diet, because it means, well, we probably shouldn't be eating the same things every day. It kills daily.
Comes back to that.
Oh, daily. Like when you ask anybody, hey, what's your health plan? Oh, I do my shake every day. Oh, I eat this every day. Is that how you eat? If you're, let's say you went on Alone, the TV show, would you eat the same thing every day? No, because you don't have a refrigerator. Okay. The fish aren't just swimming up to your campsite and going, okay, here I am, eat me. But what's interesting, when you look at the diets of this age, what you see is they haven't even thought about glucagon, because glucagon is a hormone you get from fasting, and it's a hormone that you get from eating protein. Okay. And what's the big deal this day? Fasting and high protein, right? Low carb, high protein, and fasting, right? So what happens? Where's insulin in that picture? Well, you're not really stimulating insulin too much because insulin's bad, right? But you're overstimulating glucagon in that picture. Well, you know what you find a lot of? People get insulin resistant in that because they get what's known as glucagon resistance. You make too much glucagon, you get glucagon receptor attenuates, and then you get insulin resistance from that. Because why? You're missing balance. That's why. That's just those two. And if we added in the other ones like adiponectin, well, that changes everything. Okay, so if you need adequate adiponectin secretion, you know what you have to eat in your diet? You're going to need things like leafy greens. You're going to need things like dairy. You're going to need things that are bad to get adequate adiponectin. Oh, and you got to kind of have sort of not too much saturated fat in your diet, which would blow a lot of people away today, because now saturated fat is good. But
it's funny, everything's rotating. But what I've noticed, and it just seems like with all these diet crazes, it seems to always marry back to like just a balanced, like almost like a Mediterranean diet, in the sense that they didn't run from anything, but they had a big variety. Maybe they had a little bit of meat here, maybe they had some fish here. And when you look at the blue zones, they all tend to eat similarly. Is that sort of shorthand? Obviously, the way is much more scientific and thoughtful, but is our blue zone diets sort of like a shorthand of where the science is going?
Well, I think what you hit on is 100% true, is that eventually the diet crazes fade and we return to the center, which is balance. And I will go so far as to say the controversial, shocking, offensive truth, which is that the only way you're going to achieve real and lasting health is through a nutrient-dense, varied, balanced diet. That's the only way that's going to work long-term. It's the only way. Not to say that you can't have a season where you diverge into, a keto diet or a carnivore diet, but long-term, you need a balanced, healthy diet long-term. That's the only way. That's why it's called the way. In fact, when you talk to people who, diet people, like, we're the low oxalate guys, they use that phrase. They're like, no, this is the way. this is the way, avoid oxalates. That's the way.
Oh no, they'll tell you plants are poison. They'll kill you.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
It's like,
that gets back to like, so the whole pineal thing, where are you going to get your phytate from? No, phytate's bad. Oh, yeah, but see, it keeps the pineal from calcifying. Hey, what? You get a lot of that.
and I guess the fact that it's not every day, because anything every day, now you can get a non-physiological effect or a non-effect inevitably, I guess is what you're saying. You can go too much or you can lose its efficacy. So balancing it, rotating it day to day. And that's kind of brings us to the final section, is diet a better way to eat? That's where you're at this point. You're outlining very specifically how people can thoughtfully approach this.
Yeah, it's really simple at the high level. It's so if you look at all of the trends today in health, or rather biohacking specifically, they're all about realigning with nature. So the ethos says that the problem is civilization, and the solution is realigning with nature's natural patterns and rhythms. So, we're going to realign with light and dark. We're going to block out all the artificial light at night. We're going to get more of the natural light during the day. Okay. We're going to get out of these artificial environments, and we're going to touch grass, and we're going to be, aligning with nature. Okay. Well, so what I point out in the way, which is another forehead slap, is, if you study diet for any length of time, it turns out that nature has a natural rhythm of eating, and it's provable. And it isn't just provable; it's observable, it's provable. You can look at it empirically, and it's completely missing. Like, nature has a meal plan, and it'll blow your mind once you get this. And nature's meal plan is based on one thing. There's a driving force in nature that dictates the meal plan, and it's not the refrigerator; it's scarcity. So it's the opposite. So the refrigerator dictates our meal plan here unknowingly, because you're able to store food. But nature dictates everything through scarcity, through the opposite. And so the product of scarcity is variety. Scarcity naturally introduces variety back into the diet, naturally. And what scarcity does is it keeps you from eating too much of anything, And so nature has in its natural rhythms a natural pattern any human can prove and engage in. And the challenge I throw out on this is, in your area, or somewhere close to you, there's probably a survival course. Go take it. Go take it. Go do like one of those 3-day survival courses and watch what happens. What you're going to do is you're going to start off trying to get some fish, or, who knows, a squirrel, some deer, or whatever. And it's going to not be as easy as you think. And along the way, you're going to forage. And you're also going to go hungry. So nature has 4 natural rhythms of eating. And the way is the first time that they've ever been decloaked. And again, it's so obvious that you're like, why isn't anybody pointing this out? So the first is famine. Famine is when you can't get food. You just can't get food. You try, but you can't get food. The next is foraging. So foraging is that you're eating food, but it's not your first preference. It's lower preference food, roots, nuts. Like, I've studied the Indians where I live here in Dana Point, California, and the staple of their diet was gathering acorns and making this meal out of them. And it's not their first preference. Their first preference was a seal. But they'll eat it if they can get it. Then you have feasting. So feasting is when you get something, like, we went hunting and we caught like a deer, or we got a salmon. You feast, eat as much as you possibly can. And then there's a season of abundance. Okay. Season of abundance. The Indians, they would hunt whales. They got a whale. Ooh, wow. We're eating good this winter.
Harvest time.
Yeah. Those are the 4 rhythms present in nature. Okay. And when you study those 4 rhythms, something really interesting right away comes out to you. And that is that famine and foraging always go together. Okay. Whenever you're foraging, you're always hungry. So, in other words, let's translate that into modern language. Fasting always goes together with foraging foods. Always. And if you break this down, it's mind-boggling. The reason is it stimulates bifidobacteria and Akkermansia. Foraging foods stimulate the two bacteria that are central to the immune system that not only enhance immunity in a hungry state, which is what you want, enhance autophagy, they also mimic all of the fasting pathways. So it turns up AMPK. When you are feeding those bacteria are turning up all the same pathways that fasting turns up. So nature has provided a way to optimize physiology in a famine foraging state.
That's fascinating. Can I say something about that? Because
yeah.
It's fascinating because nature abhors a vacuum. The human body, we're always satiated. So we're not turning up those reparative pathways, those AMP kinases, the sirtuins, all those things are not being activated that normally we'd be going through these periods where they would be activated. So introducing things like, do you believe in fasting every now and then, or whether it's time restricted or 3 days, or where do you land on that? Because again, nature we're wired in such a way to turn on those pathways when we're not eating. When we're eating, we're turning on anabolic pathways, typically.
Yeah, it's at the core of the immunity code. So at the core of the immunity code, so the first layer of the immunity code is you're stimulating bifido and akkermansia, and you're doing it through foraging foods, and you're doing it the day before a fast. You're replicating what you do in nature. Okay, it's built into the immunity code in the way, which is in nature, I would eat foods of lesser preference, and I would be hungry while I'm doing it or fasting, and then I would probably feast. I'd get something I really want to eat. So on day one, you're eating the foraging foods. And then on day two, you go through a short fast amplified by technology, and then you feast. And that's the perfect pattern. And then if you want to, every now and then you can introduce a longer fast, a day, 2 days, 3 days, if you want to do it. But on an ongoing basis, that 48-hour cycle is the most powerful thing you can do for your body, because you're continually in it. You're continually optimizing. You're continually sharpening through nature's natural rhythms. You reconnect to nature's natural rhythms, which is the rhythms of eating and fasting found in nature.
Yeah, it's pretty cool too. In the immunity code, I want to mention this very cool concept, because it almost sounds like, all right, I'm going to have a programmed diet. I'm not going to be able to enjoy myself. But you actually have techniques for when you do have your ice cream sundae. It's okay. You can address that with how you would eat the next day or whatever, and completely not have not have the negative baggage of having that ice cream sundae, for example. You address that in the first book for sure. I don't know if you do in the way yet.
Yeah, well, that's so. What the way is built on nature's rhythms, and then the food selection really is out of the Mediterranean diet. But then the next layer on top of that is all of the things diet should account for that doesn't, which is social interaction and the need for human connection. So diets don't allow for that. And if you actually study what people really do, they eat really good during the week, and then they do whatever on the weekends, and then they, over time they're actually gaining weight by doing that. And that's the real pattern. So the way accounts for the need for human connection through patterns that offset and techniques that offset what we do in real life. And then another layer is sleep. That food is a really powerful driver of sleep. And there are patterns of eating that can increase sleep. Like an example would be a giant breakfast in the morning will reset the body's sleep clocks, and you'll go to bed earlier that night. And on and on and on. So what the way does is takes all of these, it takes a bigger scope of diet that's been missing. Example is the immune system. How do we keep the immune system? And that's another one of the must-have mechanisms is the gut immune axis. And how do you eat for the gut immune axis, for example?
Well, that's a big deal with all these autoimmune conditions. I just got to believe that they're primarily gut related. I mean, we're constantly getting toxins in. I mean, glyphosate's everywhere. It's in the rainwater. It's in the soil, which preferentially kills good bacteria in your gut. All these different pesticides, constant war zone going on in your gut where you're getting depleted. 95% of the population not having Akkermansia means that you gut permeability issues are all over the place, and then zonulin and inflammatory markers respond to whatever comes in, and you get these conditions, and they pop up in different parts of the body. If I had an autoimmune condition, I would think I'd start with the gut. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's essential because the gut immune axis is where autoimmune conditions begin. So to break it down, um, many autoimmune issues begin with imbalanced T cell ratios. So you have different classes of T cells. You have what are called the Th1, and then you have the Th17s, and they need to exist in kind of a ratio. And what happens, like in a lot of autoimmune issues, like arthritis, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, you have too many of the Th17s and not enough of the Th1s. And like the Th17s are kind of like the SWAT team, and the Th1s are kind of like the regulators. Like when you don't have enough regulators saying, okay, boys, that's enough. And you have too many SWAT guys, they tend to go a little nutty, you know? So bifidobacteria, different strains of bifidobacteria directly impact ratios of T cells, helping to reduce the Th17s and increase the Th1s. And so that's why people who do like the gut reset, for example, they'll notice a lot of their inflammatory issues go away. And it's because you are normalizing ratios of different species that directly talk to the human immune system and affect the signals between helper cells and NKT cells and macrophages and all that.
Right. I mean, so much we got out of this. I really appreciate it. I just want to plug you. I want to plug veepnutrition.com. Yeah, you have amazing books on the immunity code, the way the immunity code diet. You break it down. So, I mean, it's complicated stuff and you've done all the work. So if anyone's serious about their health, I mean, this is a great place to start because you'll be able to funnel away all the silly stuff, like the thousands of supplements I've taken that make no sense over the years. You can cut through that with going to Joel. I definitely appreciate it. The theme of this particular show is the same. It's, St. Augustine, treat your soul as if you're going to die tomorrow. Treat your body as if you're going to live to 100. And that's what I think we did a little bit today. We treated our body with you as our guest, Joel. So I appreciate it. Any final thoughts or any final projects you want to share with the team?
I would just say check out my Instagram. It's at Real Joel Greene, and in my link, I just have a ton of free stuff. I have massive amounts of free content you can get into and just kind of discover the universe of the immunity code. And I created all this stuff really as a way to work in real life, out of the shtick of like being a full-time fitness person. And it's what I created to address real issues that people face with minimal inputs of time. So that's the purpose of it. So I would just say dig into that and, get yourself educated and take a look at it.
I appreciate it. Joel, thanks so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'll harass you again in the future, I'm sure.
Anytime, for sure.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.